Hi, Hannah.
Welcome. Hey, Pete. How's it going today?
Excellent, excellent.
Saying that as if we're not sitting 5 feet from each other, but it's okay.
Mhm.
The office banter, I suppose. So, hey, everyone. We'll give folks just a few minutes to join while we wait. Let's do a quick icebreaker. So, Pete, I'm curious. What's the best restaurant you've been to recently?
I think the best restaurant that I've been to recently is going to be where I'm taking my team tonight. This restaurant called Murad, and it's gonna be super awesome. It's a
Nice. What type of
Moroccan
cuisine
restaurant.
is it? Okay, cool. And it's in San Francisco, I assume. What area is it in?
Just a few blocks away. It's in the
Oh,
it's in like
nice.
yeah, it's in Soma.
Cool. Love to hear that. It's fun being able to go to restaurants again. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. Today we're here to talk about setting AE and SDR goals that don't suck with Atrium's co-founder and CRO Pete Kazanji. We are so excited about the amazing content and takeaways you'll get out of this event. I'm Hannah White, and I am on the Atrium team as well. I'll be moderating today's session. So let's dive right in. Today's event is brought to you by the team at Modern Sales Pros. For those of you not familiar, Modern Sales Pros is the world's largest and highest quality community for people in sales management, sales leadership, sales and revenue operations, sales enablement, and the related supporting disciplines. Modern Sales Pros' mission is to create an environment for their members to answer questions they'd struggle to solve on their own and help them see around corners they may not even know about. They do that through live sessions like this one today, an online forum, and quarterly summits. They're actually going to start promoting their upcoming, I think it's in July summit, that
Woohoo!
you'll definitely want to register for. Speakers and content for those are always incredible, so you won't want to miss it.
Oh yeah.
If you're not already a part of MSP, you'll be invited to join right after this session. But enough about MSP, onto the content that really matters today. So today's session wouldn't be possible without the sponsorship from our team at Atrium. I'm going to hand it off to Pete to say a few words.
Yeah, for sure. So, here at Atrium, we make what we call data-driven sales management software that really kind of has just like one purpose, and it's to help sales managers, so AE, SDR, AM, CSM managers use data and metrics to improve team performance. And the way that it does that is by monitoring dozens and dozens and dozens of KPIs for every single rep, every single team, and lets managers know when something is off or good, so they can get ahead of it. Right, so they can get ahead of problems before, get ahead of issues before they become problems, and also importantly, like take what's really kind of doing well and like kicking ass and spread that to the rest of the team. And one of the things that's really nifty about this is that Atrium only takes like 5 minutes to set up. You just connect your just through a read-only connection through your Salesforce instance, and and within 5 minutes, Atrium is showing you like how your reps are performing across all kinds of metrics. So, we're big sales nerds here, which is why we're going to talk about sales nerdery today, as you might imagine.
Love it. Thank you, Pete. So it's so great to have you as a sponsor, and I'm so excited to have everyone here today. I noticed there's already a couple questions coming up in the Q&A, so love that.
Love it.
Um,
We love questions. We love
yes,
interactivity.
totally. Yes, I mean, that's the point of these events. Like, I feel like it makes it so much more
Mhm.
fun. But super excited to dive in. First, let's go over just a couple of housekeeping notes. First things first is this event is being recorded, and the content, slides, and everything will be shared post-event, so don't worry about that. You'll definitely be able to circulate everything with your team. In the key takeaways or in the follow-up email, we'll include key takeaways and links to everything you need. Second, if you have any questions for our panelists, please leverage the Q&A function and the chat. This is meant to be interactive. This is meant to be fun. Ask your questions. Pete's an expert on goal setting for reps, so leverage his expertise. I'm going to pass it off to Pete to introduce himself, and we're going to go ahead and dive right into the content.
Yeah, cool. So, hey, folks, my name is Pete Kazanji. I am one of the founders and the CRO at Atrium, which we talked about 2 seconds ago. The reason why you might be interested in what I have to say about modern sales management is I've been doing it for a hot second. I used to, my first software company was a company called TalentBin, that was acquired by Monster Worldwide in 2014. And I went from kind of being like our first seller, sales manager, sales leader at TalentBin. And when we were acquired, we have about a 20-person sales organization. And then at Monster, I was responsible for new product sales, and so that for like 1,000-person sales organization. And that's really kind of like where I started getting into data-driven sales management, and kind of like the like how you can use metrics to measure and improve and kind of coach like scaled teams, like small, and then small, medium, and large teams. Coming out of Monster, I wrote a book on startup sales called Founding Sales. It's essentially like the early stage the early stage sales handbook, and then founded Modern Sales Pros. So, as you can imagine, think a little bit about about modern sales, think a little bit about data-driven sales management, and which is why we're going to be talking about setting and managing with goals today. Should be super fun.
Awesome. Thanks, Kate.
Cool.
I actually, just to tack onto what you were saying, we have an
Mhm.
awesome landing page put together to send folks copies of Founding Sales. No catch, no ask, just go ahead and get Founding Sales. So I'm going to drop that chat. Angelica just dropped one, but I'm going to drop one more that you can actually get the book through.
Nice. I like it. Delightful. Cool. So, yeah, so what we're going to do today is we're going to talk a little bit about managing with goals, setting and managing with goals, or sorry, managing with goals, and then the mechanism by which you manage with goals. You gotta set them, then monitor them, manage with them, etc. And so we're going to talk about like all that different process and how we go through that. The one of the things that I'm kind of obsessed with is continual learning for sales management. And so these are some of the resources that I've kind of been fiending over recently. Book by Corey, good friend of mine, Corey Bray, and Hillman Sori, 5 Secrets of the Sales Coach, and then John McMahon's Qualified Sales Leader. And I think, Hannah, we're gonna there's a drop that we're gonna do here.
Yes, sir.
Wonderful. So I think what we're just gonna do is just, if you'd like to get these books and a Coffees for Closers Yeti. I think I actually have one on my desk right here. Oh yeah, already had my coffee this morning though.
I
You
think
can
I'm
go
ready
ahead
for
and
cup
sign
number
up.
like 3.
Are you? Nice. I love it. Cool. So like, why are goals important? And really what it kind of comes down to is the reason why goals are important is because even though like we know that we all want to win, the big kind of challenge that organizations have is, how do we know that we're on our way to winning? How do we know we're on our way? And so the way that we can do this, and professional athletics or athletics in general is like a really good kind of proxy for this, or kind of analog for this, is that the way that we know that we're on our way to winning is by measuring and kind of like goaling on the precursors to what eventually would be required to win, right? And in short, if we can have our players, right, whether it's our players on the field or our SDRs or our AEs, execute sufficient quantity and quality of like gameplay or work, that outcome will take care of itself. The score will take care of itself, to quote one of my favorite books on the topic by Bill Walsh. And so then, like, the way to kind of think about this is that what we should be doing as a result is that we should be goaling on not just outputs, right? Like the number of runs that we're scoring, the number of, like our wins, et cetera. But really what we have to do is we have to think about the inputs, and we have to think about like efficiency metrics that are indicating to us that those inputs are high quality. And so to kind of use like a helpful example here, in athletics, choose whatever your poison is, right? Whether you're a baseball person or a basketball person or a football person or whatever, right? A chess person, a soccer person, whatever. You have to think about what those inputs are. So like in baseball, since I'm kind of a baseball person, those would be things like hits or extra base hits. Or if you're a pitcher, it's like your strikes and your balls. And then moreover, on the flip side, what you need to be paying attention to is the efficiency of it. Right? We have to say, hey, it's all well and good that this player is getting a bunch of at bats, but how is their batting average? Right? And then moreover, when they put the bat on the ball, do they do a good job on that? Like what's their slugging percentage? How far do they hit it? Right? How many bases do they get, etc. And so if what we can do is if we measure those things, one, what we can do is we know kind of like where we're going to land in the future. And then moreover, by measuring those various pieces, we can see where the shortfalls are. And then what's important about knowing where the shortfalls are is that we can intervene, because that's the whole point of management. Like you're not being paid the big bucks to just kind of like sit around and be like, all right, you're doing great. Right? What we're here to do is to understand where there are issues and then intervene to raise that performance up, or the flip side to see, hey, this person right here is like setting the world on fire. They're hitting or to use the baseball example, they're hitting the cover off the ball. How are they doing that? Because then what we can do is we can get everybody else on the team to do that as well. And then the second reason why goals are really important, and approaching goals is really important, is that it's insufficient to do it at the organization level, right? We actually have to do it at the human level, because one thing that oftentimes gets missed, especially in larger sales organizations, is like I've got 10 reps, I got 20 reps, I got 50 reps or whatever, because historically it's been more challenging to instrument at an individual level. You say like, oh, what's our forward pipeline look like for the aggregate team, or how many total opportunities are being created by the SDRs, or like what's our average win rate across the entire team. But the problem is that like your team is composed of individuals. And so the mechanism by which we can get an organization to perform better is to take those individuals and raise their performance for whatever their personal shortfall is. And we all have personal shortfalls, right? Every rep has like the thing that they need to get better on. And so by paying attention to metrics at the human level and then goaling at them at the human level with with not just those lagging indicators, but also those inputs and efficiency metrics, very quickly what we can do is we can know exactly where the critical path is for a given person, like where their improvement area is, intervene there, make them better, which then shows up in better quota attainment, more bookings, more opportunity creation if you're SDRs, better renewal rates, or better renewals if you're talking about AMs or CSMs, right? And so like that's the reason why you should be doing goals. You should be managing with goals, and specifically doing it at a human level and with respect to these inputs and efficiency metrics. So the next question is like, okay, well, like, cool, Pete, you got me convinced. Like, how do we do it, man? Well, the way to kind of think about it is it's a multi-step process. And we're going to kind of spin through, we're going to kind of seek to spin through quickly, like how to do this. But there's a couple of different steps. Like first, you got to select the metrics that you want to be paying attention to. We were kind of joking about baseball and basketball earlier there. The good news is there's a known set of metrics that matter for sales organizations, and you just have to select the ones you want to be paying attention to. Second, you got to make sure that you're collecting the relevant data in order to make, to ask questions about it. Third, got to set goals on those, right, on those metrics. So then doing that's all well and good, but then the next thing you got to do is you actually have to visualize these things such that you can consume them, right, and understand what's going on. So like the visualization, weaving it into your operating rhythm, what we like to call a sales management motion over here, kind of different than a sales motion, a sales management motion, and then using that information to then like be like, I see a thing here, I'm going to troubleshoot that and I'm going to fix it, right? And so like those are the steps that you got to do there. And so just to kind of give some examples here of like some metrics you might think about here. These are some of those. And so like you can kind of see on the the SDR side, you've got your inputs, you got your various activity metrics like, emailing or calling, and then there's more advanced things like the number of unique contacts that are being interacted with, or the number of new contacts that are being interacted with. And then you have your outputs too, like your opportunities created, or maybe your pipe created, or like ultimately booking sourced. And then on the efficiency side, it's important to make sure that you're actually instrumenting quality metrics as well. That might be things like, from an input standpoint, like email responsiveness rate would be a good example, or from a connection of activities to outputs, it might be the ratio of the number of accounts that are being interacted with to the number of opportunities that are coming out. There's like those various efficiency metrics. And I think actually, this slide is all well and good. Excuse me, this slide is all well and good here, but we actually have a much kind of like beefier we actually have a much beefier version of this that I actually just dropped. It's a support document that I just dropped in the chat here.
Pete, you totally just read my mind. I dropped the
Oh,
same
my
thing.
bad. Oh, jinx. Webinar jinx. You owe me a Coke. I taught my 4-year-old jinx the other day. I should have never done that. That was a big mistake. Strategic error. Yeah. And so then the other thing too is that these metrics are kind of related to each other in the forms like the outputs in this visualization here go from, you got your outputs on your far left and you have your inputs going further right. And so what's kind of cool about this is that if you set goals and then visualize based on, a number of these inputs and outputs and efficiency metrics, then you can kind of see where things are going wrong here. We actually have these in the form of laminates. I don't think we have a sign up for that. Maybe we can do that in the future. Or maybe what we can do is we can email attendees and RSVPs and be like, hey, yo, if you want these, because these are actually pretty cool. They're not on my desk right now because I think one of my account executives stole them. This is the downsides of having account executives in the office. They just steal your stuff. But what we have is we have these metrics inspections trees here to kind of help you understand, like, one, what are how are they related, but then also two, like where the potential root cause might be associated with an issue.
Yeah.
So that's
on that note,
oh,
Pete, if
uh-huh.
anyone wants to drop their email in the chat. Oh, sorry, that probably doesn't make a ton of sense, but I'll follow up like you had said with an offer to get you guys those laminates. And then we also have a digital version we can share in the follow-up. The great thing about the physical laminates is that they're like a little bit bigger than printer paper sized. So it's really nice to have them like around reps' desks, whether it's at home or in a physical office.
I found who stole them. One of our new rampers stole them. It's you, Richard. See you over there. Anyway, cool. So that's selecting our metrics, and then the next thing is like, okay, cool. Like, we selected our metrics. That's cool, man. Like, now I got to make sure I can actually calculate these things. Well, so first you got to collect the data. And really, like, when you're thinking about these things, you got to be like a little careful about, like, data collection overload. And what I mean by that is, like, not if it's automated. And so, like, the good news is that modern, oh man, we need to update SalesLoft's logo to the new pretty green one.
Oh, good call.
Yeah, I'm gonna get yelled at by Kyle. It's like, what are you doing? So like, if you can automate data like collection as much as possible, and the good news is, like, modern sales engagement software like SalesLoft or Outreach or Mixmax or Groove, like, will do a pretty good job of like collecting that data, like email data, calling data, even getting like meeting data piping into the CRM in some sort of capacity. Obviously, there's going to be some stuff that you're going to have to manually collect. I always like caution folks that, like, really like choose their spots and choose their battles on kind of like the manual data collection. There obviously some things are pretty important there, like, obviously opportunity creation or attributing those to the SDRs, making sure that there's like SDR attribution on the op, because if there's like no connection between the SDR and the op, like, how do you know how much pipe an SDR has created, or like what the win rate is on the ops that they've created, all those sort of things. But just, before you go off like half cocked and decide that, like, we're going to put a bajillion validation rules on this, that, and the other thing, like, let's just, make sure that you're actually going to want to be measuring it. and you're not just collecting the data for collecting data's sake, because then you're going to end up with like a bunch of reps who are like really mad at you because like all they're trying to do is advance an opportunity at a stage and they're getting like 6 errors. So that's kind of like some way to kind of think about this. There is, I mean, like with dedicated data-driven sales management software like Atrium, those systems will hook directly into these other systems. Like Atrium, as an example, hooks into the CRM, but also the calendar system, the email system, and some of these other folks as well. But it doesn't necessarily take like specific software to do that. You can also do it manually as well. So cool. We're talking about data collection there. Great. So now let's talk about like once we've got that data collected in some sort of capacity, now what we're going to do is we're going to set some goals, because like, again, we've got our metrics selected, we got our data collected, and so now we're going to like set some goals on that. And so the way to do that is kind of like a mixture, right? You can't just like be like, hey, here's the goals. It's like a mixture of a couple of different things, and what like there's kind of like 3 different ways that you can do this that you kind of want to mix together. One, you want to use historical performance, right? Like looking at what your team has done historically. Like say you've got 10 SDRs on your team and you're like, hey, you know what? Like we want to set a goal around like the ratio of activities to opportunity creation, just so we can like understand that our SDRs are being efficient. Well, how are you going to figure out like what that should be? Well, you would look at your 10 SDRs and you'd look across like the trailing 90 days or trailing 6 months or whatever, and see like what that ratio has been, or their ratio of opportunity creation to like accounts engaged or email engagement rate or whatever. Same is true with like your AEs. You're like, okay, like what's our historical new business win rate, or like how many opportunities that our AEs historically have in their pipe, right? Like what's the bottom, what's the top. So you can use that. The downside associated with that is that just because it has been the case historically doesn't mean that that's like necessarily like what the goal ought to be. Like you might have a bunch of sandbagging going on, as an example. Like sometimes that happens. And so the other thing that is important to do is to use a bottoms up approach, right? As well. So just say like, hey, look, you know what? We got 40 hours in the week. We got 50 hours in the week. What do we expect our SDRs to be doing? What do we expect our AEs to be doing? What are they spending time doing? If your AEs are like responding to a bunch of RFPs and there's like 2 RFPs that they get a week and each one takes like 3 hours, like it's like 6 hours of stuff, like of RFP work. So saying, hey, you should be doing 25 customer facing meetings a week is probably nonsense, right? Whereas if you have a more velocity organization, like maybe a mid-market organization, where they should be having like 10, 15, maybe like 17 customer facing meetings a week, again, like with 15 minutes of pre-call planning and maybe like 30 minutes of follow-up, because they're all SDR fed and there's no prospecting time they have to do. Wonderful. Like again, this is a bottoms up approach. Like what should somebody be spending their time doing? And then the last thing to do is benchmarking. And so benchmarking, this is something that like conveniently, because we have whatever it is, like north of 300 customers at this point, we're able to kind of help our customers do some benchmarking around like, hey, like what actually should be our customer facing meeting counts? What should our, what is a good amount of like new opportunities that are coming into account executive pipes on a monthly basis? Like what is the right level of like the number of ops that somebody should have in pipe at any given point in time? This information can be a little bit more difficult to get. Like there are some organizations out there that like provide benchmarking as a service, kind of different consulting and what have you. If you can get access to that sort of information, it can be very helpful, right? So you kind of know like, oh, okay, cool. Like we're not taking crazy pills over here. Like we line up with benchmarks, or like, oh man, like we're way under benchmark. That's crazy. I guess we need to get our act together, right? And so then what you do is you take those 3 things and you kind of like blend them together, iterate it, and then and kind of set goals on that. And then lastly, what you need to do is just like publish that out there, such that people like, and then because what you're going to do is you're going to iterate, right? Like your first shot on this is probably not going to be right. And so that's why it's really important like not to overthink it. So oftentimes what organizations will do is they'll just like overthink it, and they're like, oh, we need to have meetings about meetings about meetings about meetings in order to do this. And in the meantime, you're not managing your sales organization with goals and with metrics, and like that's just like a bunch of opportunity costs. So a big kind of thing there is like, hey, just start. Like it's not going to be perfect, and that's okay. Just some kind of like examples of like, what this might look like for folks. Different sales motions are going to have like different ranges for the different metrics, like customer facing meetings for account executives, anywhere between 7 to 15. Kind of hard to have like 25 or 30, like in case unless you're having 15-minute meetings or what have you. But like this is kind of like a pretty standard range. These are pretty standard activity ranges there. The number of opportunities coming into pipe, similarly as well. Then as you kind of get up to these ratios, like win rates and of course like bookings and deal cycle, that's like super motion dependent. So it's going to be pretty hard for you to benchmark against other organizations unless you constrain down the sales motion in question. Same with SDRs, right? So these are oops, did I click on that wrong? Oops. Yeah, I think I just have a little boo-boo here.
Yeah,
so
SDR metrics aren't in there.
Cool. Well, don't worry. Here, let's put a screenshot of the right slide into the chat when we get a chance.
Yes, I'm grabbing it.
But yeah, same sort of situation. So cool. So now once we've set goals, now we gotta visualize them. And the reason why we want to visualize them is because like the joke we like to make here at Atrium is like, hey, if a tree falls in the woods and nobody's around, does it make a noise? And then similarly, if if you have an SDR dashboard or an AE dashboard and nobody looks at it, like, is anyone doing prospecting work? Right? Like we got to look at this stuff in order to make sure that like things are actually happening, because hope is not a strategy. And so these are kind of like some principles to kind of think of there. With respect to reports and dashboards, one thing to kind of think about is like, what is this for? With a report, it's like, hey, what question are we answering? What specific question are we answering? Like, for example, say we have an SDR team, right? Say, hey, this report right here is telling us for like so far this week, how many customer facing emails has each SDR sent? That's like a very specific question, right? And another visualization might be, hey, for the trailing 90 days by week, how many on a week by week basis, how many customer facing emails has each SDR been sending? Those are different questions, right? They're both important questions. They're different questions. And so that's what you should think about a report saying, like, hey, what question is this answering? Right? And you could do the same thing for account executives as well. Like, how many customer facing meetings have we had so far yet this week or so far yet this month, totaled up and like, maybe leaderboarded there. And then you might do the same thing on a trended basis as well. And so then the next thing would be, oh, okay, well, like what a dashboard is, it's an aggregation of various reports. And so with that, what you want is to say, hey, where is this being consumed? Like where and when is this being consumed? And this is one of the things that organizations will oftentimes kind of like trip themselves up on, is they'll just like, kind of create the like kitchen sink giant dashboard, God dashboard for like all time. The problem is like a dashboard with 16 tiles or 20 tiles or like 24 tiles or whatever. It's just like, it's kind of like reading tea leaves. Like, what am I supposed to be looking at here? Oh my God, there's like so many, there's so many squiggly lines. And so just like constraining down and being very, very specific and saying like, hey, look, this is this dashboard that we're going to look at on, like a Rise and Shine dashboard. This is a dashboard that we look at every day at 8:30 a.m. Maybe it gets emailed out to the team, and it shows us how much activity was done by the SDR team yesterday, and how much has happened so far this week. And maybe it's like, calls yesterday, calls this week, emails yesterday, emails this week, and maybe like opportunity creation so far this week and opportunity creation so far this month. Boom, like very, very specific, deliver it every morning. We know exactly what it's for. It tells us these sort of things right here and allows us to and it's for that. And that would be different than like maybe our SDR team meeting or our AE team meeting and the kind of the dashboards associated with that. Cool. The last thing to kind of note here is like, and I think I kind of touched on this earlier, having multiple views by metric can be very helpful. So to the example earlier, it's insufficient to say like, oh, here's how many opportunities have on a per SDR basis have been created so far this week, and then not have maybe trailing 90 days on a week by week basis, or maybe trailing 6 months on a month by month basis there, because you're only looking at the opportunities that have been created like maybe this month or what have you. Unfortunately, you don't have a visualization of and how that's been going over time, right? You might have an SDR who's low there, and you like in the current month, and the immediate next question is like, oh, has this been happening for a while? And so the problem, of course, with like traditional reporting is then like reconfiguring that report in order to trail that out oftentimes is like an act of Congress. So if you can have that next question right next to it, like, oh, here's trailing 6 months on a month by month basis. Oh yeah, Bobby has been declining. Or, oh man, Susie's really high this month. Has that been the case recently? Oh no, that's right. Susie just always kicks ass. Right? Hey, maybe we should figure out like what the secret of her success is. And so that's a really kind of important thing, is to like have multiple views for metrics. This is why data-driven sales management software that makes it very easy for you to kind of like click and like ask the next question can be very, very helpful, because it kind of like helps remove some of that. The next thing to kind of talk about is like, what are the common ways that organizations do this from a tooling standpoint? And there's really kind of like 3 big buckets there. There's like CRM reporting, kind of comes with Salesforce, comes with HubSpot, comes with whatever. Can be good, if you've got like the time and the wherewithal to like feed and water it. It's already kind of like there in your CRM or what have you. Challenges is like, can require a lot of brain damage in order to collect the relevant data, and then pretty much everything needs to be built from scratch, and then you have to, of course, come back to it and look at it and look at it and look at it and look at it. Same with BI. BI is like, whether it's in large organizations, you'll have like a Looker implementation or a Tableau implementation or what have you. Again, really powerful, pretty big challenge to get the data set up, and then moreover, anytime like a non-analytical, non-technical user like wants to ask that next question or like add an incremental tile to a dashboard or what have you, you're filing a Jira ticket against the data team, or like emailing somebody, and like hopefully it gets done in a week or so. Don't get me wrong, they can be very powerful, and they can like look at other sources of data as well. But when being used specifically for data-driven management, it's data-driven sales management, a little bit of a legacy approach. And then there's of course like purpose-made software, like data-driven sales management software. Atrium is a good example of this. The nice thing about it, it's like instant to set up. It's specific for sales. It's not quite as customizable as like a BI or what have you. You can't ask any question you want in the world, but you can ask pretty much like 90% of the questions that matter. and then moreover, the software just monitors, continuously monitors these things in order to bring information to the managers. And so these are kind of like the trade-offs for these various approaches. And kind of on that topic, just like a really quick overview of Atrium for folks, since we're talking about it, the way that we think about it is that when you think about a modern sales motion, sales management motion, really the things that people ought to be spending their time, and like what they need is they need something that has every KPI that matters for their AE team, their SDR team, their AMCSM team, already ready to go without having to like beg somebody to make something for them, or like spend half hour trying to put it together themselves. And then more importantly, that stuff needs to be being monitored for them, right? Continuously monitored. And that information needs to come to managers to help them with things like proactive goal tracking. Like, hey, are we gonna like, how's each of these SDRs tracking towards their opportunity creation goal for this month, because it's the 12th right now? Are we gonna get there? How are we doing on our activities on a weekly basis? Same with like account executives. How are we tracking towards our goals? And then also alerting, right? Like, hey, this rep right here, his win rate is like substantially off as compared to his peers. You should investigate that, Pete. Oh, thanks, little buddy. Right. And kind of automatically diagnosing performance. And so this is essentially what Atrium does, is it does all these things specifically for managers, for non-technical, non-analytical, like, managers to use data to improve their team performance, whether it's an SDR team, an A team, AMCSM team. And we do this for north of 200. We're going to update that. I think we're like north of 300 now, but like just hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of customers use Atrium to really modernize their sales management motion and just infuse data and metrics all throughout their sales management motion. So that's a little bit on us. As I said earlier, huge sales nerds. That's why we kind of love this stuff. So kind of give some examples of what these visualizations might look like. This right here is like the kind of this idea of like two visualizations. So you got a total on the right, you got a trend on the left. And so the questions that are being answered here on the right is like, hey, this month, how many customer facing meetings have our AEs done so far? We can kind of see, what's the guy's name? Oh, Cyril Proudbottom, kind of kicking ass. King Richard kicking ass, right? Michael Darling, I don't know, man, you're a little low, right? And then important, like, so this is a good example, like, hey, what's like, now I want to ask the next question and see like, how long has that been the case for Michael Darling? Right, so these are good examples of that. You can do the same thing for things like, opportunity ownership there. It can be things like other metrics for other use cases, like pipe hygiene would be a really good example of that. So the number of untouched opportunities in somebody's pipe, are they on top of their pipe right now, and have they been getting better at it over time? In this example right here, you can see that apparently someone had a talking to on this team, a few weeks ago. Hey guys, your pipe hygiene is the pits. We need to get this going on, and we're gonna have a recurring meeting on the calendar for you guys to clean this up, because, and then boop, what you can see is like, guess what? The coaching stuck. And then you can kind of do the same stuff in ramp as well, because obviously ramping is a really critical point in time for organizations there. And so like having an understanding of how people's opportunity ownership is ramping up over time, or this opportunity ownership or customer facing meeting volumes is really impactful there. Cool. So those are some visualizations, which is good. Next, let's talk about how this gets woven into your sales management motion, right? How do we make sure that this is being distributed and consumed in a way that allows us to get ahead of these issues, that catch these issues and then fix them, right? Rather than being caught on the back foot. And so there's a couple different ways you can think about distributing these visualizations to make sure that that's happening. For the most part, every like reporting package that you're gonna have access to, whether it's like your Salesforce, your CRMs reporting or dashboards or whatever, even like Atrium is a great example of this. Usually like URLs are your friend, right? Like the individual report URLs. And like they can either be like bookmarked, they can be hyperlinked from like a Notion document or a Google Doc. From like what we do is we have our sales team meeting agenda, and there's like, I don't know, like 15 or like 20 different like reports that are hyperlinked out of there. And we just like go through it, and like, all right, like I actually go through it 30 minutes ahead of time for the meeting to make sure I'm prepped for the meeting, to make sure that I'm consuming that information. You can also, and these are not substitutes, I actually like, it's like a belt and suspenders situation. So you can use URLs to like hyperlink from places, bookmark, etc. The other thing that you want to do is you want to make sure that this information is like coming to managers, like, because it is a very rare breed of sales managers like, hey, you know what? I should really go over and look at a report right now or dashboards. But if it's coming to them in Slack, if it's coming to them via email, can't run, can't hide. And it's good now. And of course, you click through to the main thing. And but what it is, it's like it makes it such that it's coming to you, so somebody doesn't have to be like, hey, you know what I should do. And this is actually one of the kind of pretty big frustrations a lot of organizations have with kind of traditional CRM packages in this front, is like you're pretty limited in terms of how many of those broadcasts you can have. And I think this is actually probably one of the now that you guys are making me think about it, thanks. This is probably one of the reasons why organizations end up with these like insane kitchen sink dashboards that are like 30 tiles to be broadcast, because instead of being able to be like very pinpointed and precision, you run out of subscriptions. And so like subscriptions are your friend, right? So like, here it is at the end of the week, here's the kudos, the kudos leaderboard, yay, right? Here it is Monday morning, or sorry, Wednesday morning, here's where we're at, right? So anyway, you want to think about like meeting people where they are. And then these are kind of like the less common, or not necessarily less common, but kind of like other examples of like where this can show up. people have historically liked to put metrics on TVs, especially in a remote environment. It kind of like loses its purpose. Even back in the day, like putting dashboards up on TVs, you would like watch reps walk by and like they don't even pay attention to it. Which is why like really what has to happen is you need to weave these things into your sales management motion versus like, hey, it's on the TV right now, right? Like my job's done. I'm a data-driven manager. No, that's not the case. It's just like wallpaper. That said, putting on TVs and things like that can be kind of fun because literally it just like it's more about like instilling a culture and saying like, hey, look, see how there's like metrics on TVs that I know that none of you look at. Well, that's because we're a data-driven organization and you're going to be held accountable to your metrics. I know that you're not going to look at them, right? You're going to look at them in Slack or an email, but like that's where that can be helpful. And then other places where this can show up too is like decks, QBR decks, board decks, et cetera, et cetera. Kind of some examples of what this looks like in practice. This is actually an old meeting agenda that's just like hyperlinked to various reports sitting in the Google Calendar invite right there. These are some other examples of kind of like, of URLs for, URLs for bookmarking, what have you. This is another example here. This is the more modern version. Like this is like a preview of what we use from an agenda standpoint for our sales team. Sales team meaning again, there's just like hyperlinks off to all of these various reports and dashboards that get consumed ahead of time, and they're just like at our fingertips there. And then importantly, you can have this information being broadcast out as well. But a way to kind of think about this though is like as a manager, as a leader, what you're doing, or an operations person, what you're doing is you're kind of constructing this rhythm, what we like to call a sales management motion. And so you can kind of see here across like we've got 4 weeks in a month. So this is like a month, right? And then our rhythm within that month. So we've got our 4 weeks. We've got our Monday morning. It's the beginning of the month. We're going to do a retrospective on last month, kind of look at the metrics associated with that. Then we've got our various stand-ups on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday morning, and kind of the metrics associated with that. In our one-on-ones, we probably have various dashboards that we're using for that, for coaching. And then, as we kind of go through the rest of the month, that kind of tunes up or tunes down depending on kind of where we're at. So the last thing, kind of the big thing, especially that's interesting right now, is that when things like how do you adjust when things change, right? And I think a lot of people are kind of like thinking about this right now as relates to some of the macroeconomic environment that's happening here. Certainly 2 years ago, when COVID hit the fan, this was a very big topic as well. And so, like, how do you adjust? How do you adjust those things? And so, really, it's like kind of simple. Really, what it is you're just doing that like goal setting exercise that we talked about previously, just doing it again, but like with new information, right? And this is why it's really nice if you have a system that can make it very easy even for like non-technical, non-analytical users to be able to use this themselves, because you're often going to want to be able to adjust, on if not on a monthly basis, probably on a quarterly basis, even if there aren't like weird exogenous shocks going on there. So really what you're going to do here is you're going to figure out new baselines. Maybe you need to set new output goals and quotas, and then you got to enforce those new baselines, right? And so how you're going to do that is like when you figure out those new baselines, you got to find your key KPIs to re-benchmark. Probably what those are going to be is like the revenue formula and the pipeline formula, like revenue formula for AEs, pipeline formula for SDRs. And then you need to figure out like what the new reality might be, right? Like what's the new reality? And again, kind of like that, because your historical data may not be relevant anymore because something's changed in the market. And so you can kind of see that happening here. Like this is actually a screenshot from COVID times, early March of 2020, and you can see that this was the number of customer-facing first meetings for a team, or like here, and you can see it dropped pretty substantially. So that might be like the new, God, not to reuse an overused phrase, but like that might be the new normal right there. Is this many initial meetings, and so you'll have to adjust accordingly. The same thing might be true for like SDRs, right? So this is an SDR team right here. Previously, this was their email engagement rate, like the level of responsiveness on the team. and then all of a sudden now the level of responsiveness drops down pretty substantially, and you would want to modify as appropriately, right? And so then the thing that you need to kind of think about is like, what is the right sampling period there, and kind of like what is required there, what you should be thinking about that might characterize how long it's going to take for like that new sampling period, or for you to like know what those new levels might be. Would be one, the number of reps you got, because if you got more reps, you got more sample. So like if you've got a 20-person SDR team or like a 50-person AE team, probably after a couple of weeks, it's going to be pretty clear what your new kind of like customer facing meeting volume is going to be. Whereas if you have much smaller number of reps, or like maybe what your win rate is, it might take longer if you got fewer reps. Also, the same is true with like sales motion velocity. So you got a faster sales motion, maybe you got a 30-day sales cycle, your like new win rate's going to show up 30 days later, right? And then moreover, the new normal, if you will show up in precursor metrics faster. It'll show up in like output metrics. So as an example, with that email engagement rate metric we were looking at earlier for SDRs, pretty quickly you'll be able to figure out if there's like a new level of like responsiveness in the market, because it's a leading indicator. But if it traditionally takes like a month to like heat up a prospect in order for them to pop to an opportunity, well, you might not see that show up until later on, right? And so these are kind of like some examples of what that looks like in practice there. Yeah, these are kind of like what some of the examples, like this is opportunity creation per week for the SDR team. This SDR team here, you can see there was like a right, or customer facing meeting volumes there and what have you. And so then based on that, what you would want to do is like cascade those realities out to the rest of your organization. So for instance, if it turns out that like first meeting volume is substantially lower and you're not able to figure out a way of remediating that, well, you probably need to change your quotas. Because like, unless there's a mechanism by which to raise win rates or raise ASPs or what have you, like the reality is that like it's probably going to be pretty hard to hit quotas that were set 6 months ago in a new normal environment where win rates have dropped in half, or first meetings have dropped, or what have you. And so there's a couple ways you can do that. I think we have some worksheets that you can use if you want to. You can actually use this just to like set these goals for your organization. I think actually we have this granular sales model, sales org model here. This is actually something that our customer success team does with our new customers, is like help take them through what their kind of like their like goals harness should be, using things like this, but also like even precursors to it, kind of like the examples we had above. Wonderful. And then the last thing we'll touch on here is this notion of like troubleshooting and resolution. And the reason why, it's all well and good for us to have, we've got our metrics selected, we're collecting the data, we've got our goals set, we've got our visualizations in place, and like we're making sure, and it's woven into our sales management motion. If you're not doing anything with it, it kind of doesn't matter. Like you're kind of just going through the motions. And so this is why making sure that you're not just consuming it, but also like reasoning and interpreting it, and then taking action against it. I do another master class on data-driven coaching, which is kind of like what we're talking about here, is like using this information to have conversations to change rep behavior, to make sure that people are changing what it is that they are doing in order to drive better business outcomes. That's kind of this step right here. And so first, what you want to do is you want to detect potential issues in those visualizations. We'll kind of show you what that looks like. Hey, something's off, right? Something's off with this rep, or whoa, this rep has changed over time, or wow, this rep is like way above everybody else, or this team is outperforming this team over here, even though they sell in the same segment. So first you got to detect issues, then you got to diagnose. Okay, what's the root cause associated with the fact that this AE has a higher win rate as compared to everybody else, or this AE has a lower win rate as compared to everybody else? And then what we have to do is we have to communicate that to the rep. Hey, I'm seeing this ABC, right? I'm seeing this. let's co-create a resolution to this, or like a plan of action here. And then next, what we got to do is loop back and see if that change has been made, and if the desired output has happened there. And again, there's a really great session on this on data-driven coaching, which I don't know, we'll probably do it like next month or the month after that or whatever. I'm sure it's like on the calendar already. Um, but this is what we got to do with these goals. And so kind of some examples of what this might look like would be, you can kind of see this is customer facing meeting volume. This is a visualization of customer facing meeting volume for all of these reps. And what you can see is like there's the person in the orange there, what's his name? Brer Rabbit, right? Something has changed there, right? He was higher from a customer facing meeting volume standpoint, and that's degraded. That's a change, right? There's probably something for us to do there. Similarly, what we can see is that the two at the bottom, I think it's green and blue there, they're chronically low, right? I think it's Judy and Murloc. These are amazing names. They're chronically low. That's something that we probably need to get ahead of. And then conversely, Queen of Hearts, turquoise there, she's chronically high. And so what we've seen here is we've detected like 4 different insights here that probably have coaching actions associated with it. With Brer Rabbit, it's like, hey, what's changed? What's going on, dude or dudette, that's making it such that this is degraded for you? You know, what's going on? Like, is it an opportunity inflow question? Let's have a conversation about this. Are you feeling disengaged? What's shaking? That conversation is going to be different than the conversations with Judy Hopps and Murloc the Magician, where it's like, hey, this has been low for a long time here. What do we need to do in order to raise this up? And then conversely, with Winnie the Pooh, what is the secret of your success? How are you able to keep this like customer facing meeting volume up? Oh, well, I figured out this really interesting prospecting hack on LinkedIn. Oh, you did? Yeah, it's making it such that I can self prospect 3 opportunities a week, just on my own, in addition to being fed by the SDRs. Oh, awesome. Well, how about if we like host a brown bag on that, and you can show the other the other AEs how that works? Oh, okay. Ah, awesome. Right. So how do we generalize success? And so other ways you can look for kind of shifts and things that are up would be things like goal tracking. So like this is a visualization of like automated goal tracking. This happens to be from Atrium, but you can kind of do this like visually in a tabular view in the CRM. Right, but what we can see here is like somebody who's off with respect to their email volume a little bit, and then super off with respect to their pipe hygiene metrics there. And then one other thing that you can do here, it's like we're talking about visualization and kind of problem detection. This is one of the primary benefits of dedicated data-driven sales management software, is what we call anomaly detection, where because this stuff is all just like math and statistics, you can have a computer do it for you, and the computer can come to you and say, hey, this rep's opportunity ownership is way lower than everybody else. Like, you got to get ahead of that. So rather than having to use our eyeballs in order to see that number is lower, instead, like software can do that for us and then deliver that information to us. And the same is true with like in ramping and what have you. The last thing, and we kind of touched on this earlier with respect to our handy dandy laminates here, is that one way of like digging in is like looking at where these root causes are. Looking at like where there might be an issue and then kind of going to the right whoop, in order to figure out what the problem is. So like, for instance, if somebody has like a bookings problem, right, where is that coming from? Is it because of the number of wins that they have is low, or is their ASP low, or is their deal cycle elongating? Oh, okay. If their win rate is low, if their wins are low, is that because they're not getting enough attempts, or because their win rate is off? And if their win rate is off, well, like there's potentially upstream consequences associated with that, or causes associated with it. Like maybe their opportunity conversion rate is off as compared to their peers, right? Or it's degraded over time, or maybe their pipe hygiene is problematic there. And the same is true over on SDR land as well. Wonderful. So that's kind of like our our setting and managing with goals thing, our masterclass here. What I again, like I said, if if you're interested, we'd love to send you a pack of these wonderful sales management books here, and a little Yeti as well. Sorry, it's not little. It's actually fairly large for the coffee achievers out there. I think we're going to go ahead and drop that in the chat here. And then there's other kind of future further resources here. And I think there were a couple of questions. So maybe what I can do is get into this. So Vinay here has a question around like, what would the ideal annual quota for an SME or mid-market AE where average selling price would be $10,000 of ARR? We're setting 500K ARR for a 12-month period. That like, so the short answer to your question is really that it depends. And so like, that's the thing that we were talking about up top about how to set your goals. That would apply here as well. Like, how have your AEs done historically, right? In a given 12-month period. Also, from a bottoms up standpoint, what is the historical win rate of your AEs? What is the ASP? You talk about the ASP being 10K here, but like, what's the win rate, right? How many customer facing meetings does it take in order to close a deal? So this is like a bottoms up calculus that would help you understand whether or not 500K is a defensible, attainable goal, which would then be combined with your historical data in order to say like, oh yeah, this actually does work, really well. What you're talking about right there smells okay, right? But I would hate to say like, and this is why blindly taking benchmarks is potentially a problematic situation, because you don't necessarily know that somebody else's sales motion and your sales motion line up there. Cool. So what else we got here? Peter Fries this is a fantastic question. Do you recommend having stretch goals that are difficult to attain, or SMART goals that are reasonable to attain? We use OKRs at the org level, often emphasize the benefits of setting stretch-oriented goals. I'm a big fan of like, this kind of goes to the historical goal historical attainment. I'm a big fan of like setting goals above average. Like, you don't want to put it at like the 80th percentile, because then that can be like, that can be disempowering, right, and demotivating. But just like setting it at the average can also be like, for the people who are outperforming, it kind of be like, okay, I can hit this goal like falling out of bed. And so doing something where it's kind of like in between there, like a 60th percentile or 70th percentile, can be a really impactful way of doing that. The other thing that's really rad as well is what you can do is you can use spiffs and accelerators to help people like naturally reveal the level of performance, like the true level of performance. So for instance, if you set a goal, you say, hey, you know what, we have an expectation that our SDR should be creating like 20 opportunities per month or something like that, right? But then and you goal on that and then comp on that, but then moreover you say, hey, and you know what, once you get above that, they accelerate, like we're paying 2x for opportunities that are above 20 or whatever. Well, pretty quickly what you might end up with is like, you might end up with a bunch of SDRs that are busting out 30 opportunities in a month, and you might have inadvertently revealed that like actually the goal should be 25, right? And that can be really helpful from a goaling standpoint as well. And then also goals change over time. So as we get better and better and better and better, and like obviously our sales motion should improve over time if we have a good sales management approach, then you can kind of like raise those goals as we get higher leverage, as we get more automation, etc. Absolutely fantastic question, Peter. Thank you for asking that. Wonderful. So I think we're actually out of time here. So Angelica, is there anything else that we need to cover?
No, thank you so much. So we're just going to wrap things up. And first, we want to thank everyone for attending. We love having you here. And thank you to our wonderful sponsor, Atrium. Be sure to check them out. And also thank you, Pete, for this wonderful session. The recording and key takeaways will be available on the Modern Sales Pros website. And don't forget to check out our upcoming events.